All right, we're on. Awesome. Okay. Afternoon all, morning, Biddle. How is everybody doing today? Biddle, what's up? How's your day going so far? Calls and meetings, I assume.
Wonderful Thursday, great start here about 7:30 a.m. on the West Coast, a little earlier than you in UK, but happy to talk to all of our fans here. Great day so far.
Awesome. And Guy, how's your day going? You're in London with me, right? Or in England at least?
Yes, absolutely. Hi there. Hi, Steph. I'm here in North London. Very humid, very strange weather. But I mean, typical English weather, so I can complain. Let's put it that
Yeah,
way.
definitely. I feel like I keep saying this all week where England is just not good at extremes. So if it's hot, we don't have AC. And if it's cold, like our tires can't deal with the snow. So we're always in this, like, we just need it to be mild. England is like a mild country. That's what we want. Awesome. Okay, so let's kick off. So welcome everyone to the Keys to AWS Optimization, the show where we share stories, concepts, and solutions to help you unlock your spend at AWS. I am your host today, Stephanie Gooch, with my co-host, Michael Biddle, or Biddle as we like to call him. And our special guest today is Guy. So welcome everyone. And today we're going to be talking about Graviton. I mean, if you're like me, you may have never heard of this before. Before I started at Amazon, I had not heard of Graviton. And it's been a steep kind of learning curve. And it's a great way to optimize your compute and your EC2 compute in general, or your kind of database and lots more at AWS. And Guy's a specialist in this area, and he's been helping me a lot with the customer engagement. I've really enjoyed. So today, we're going to chat about what is Graviton, how you can use it, a couple of customer stories from these guys, and a little bit of a live session to see how you can actually see where you can find Graviton on your show, on your console. So let's kick off with our classic. As always, whenever we have a guest, we do our 1-minute origin story. And also, please feel free to throw comments and questions in the chat. We love to hear from everybody. We want to know your questions on Graviton. If you've used it, how you've experienced with it, any recommendations, any suggestions, we want to hear from you. Okay, cool. So, Guy, give us your 1-minute origin story.
Okay. So just the context about who I am, right? Perfect. So Guy Ben Baruch, Senior Partner Solution Architect in AWS, based in London. Joined AWS in March 2018, so a bit more than 3 years. Until recently was working closely with telcos in the UK, and now I've transitioned to work with partners in the telco business unit, so focusing on the telco, hence why my shirt shows here, AWS, telecom. Yeah, I had a bit of thought about what to wear today, but there you go. And I had quite a few experiences with different customers and partners, specifically about Graviton. I was very passionate about that and try to figure out how I can help them. So happy to share some of those experiences today.
Awesome. I am obviously a fan of the branded t-shirt, and if anybody wants to send us a branded t-shirts, Amazon people, looking out for some swag. Awesome. Okay, so let's go straight into it. Guy, why don't you give us a kind of brief description of what Graviton is?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Steph. So basically, on AWS, we offer a variety of different instances based on different chipsets, essentially, right? So we want to give the flexibility for our customers to choose. So we have traditionally, the Intel x86 chipsets and the instances based on that. We have the AMD ones, right? Because we do want to give the flexibility for customers. And a couple of years, what essentially happened is we acquired a company which is called Annapurna Labs. And Annapurna Labs are building and designing chipsets, if you will. And then we thought, how we can, as AWS, basically build and leverage the economy of scale to have our own chipsets, which we wanted to tailor them for the usage of the cloud, if you will. So this is basically where the idea came of, building those Graviton instances, which are essentially based on ARM technology, which is a bit different from the x86, which is being used by Intel or AMD.
Right. Okay. So you keep mentioning Intel, AMD. Can you explain for people maybe, because we have a lot of different viewers here, hopefully there are people from finance, there's developers, managers, stakeholders, all the kind of people that are interested in cost optimization. So give us a bit of a description about what those two things actually are.
Yeah, absolutely. So Intel has been obviously a major force when it comes to building and manufacturing chipsets. And those chipsets can be used, on your personal computer at home, laptops, but also, servers at data centers, for example,
Right.
where you need a bigger spec and so on. And same for AMD, right? They develop their own chipsets and hardware and so on. And those chipsets, for example, Intel are very, very popular, as you all know, right? On your Windows laptop at home, and so on and so forth. But what we've seen in the industry is that we have this, Intel chipsets, which are very popular. But for the mobile side of things, for example, we saw the ARM chipsets becoming very popular as well. And the reason why those ARM processors were very very popular, especially on mobile, or when you need lower energy consumption, is exactly because of that. Because those ARM processors require a lower amount of energy consumption compared to the, I won't say traditional, but the x86, the Intels and the
Right.
NVIDIAs of the world.
Yeah.
So that was, back in time. Obviously, we can explain about how that got changed over time, but that's how it used to be, at least.
Yeah. Just this question I'm just going to throw it up now from Rob. So is Graviton a subset group of EC2 or a separate team? I'm curious, for example, would there ever be a regular M6X large, or would M6 only ever be a M6G? For those of you, M6 is kind of like the group of instance types. The G represents the Graviton at the end of it. Or are those two lines separate teams? So I would assume that there's always going to be, they'll be distributed between two different types, but I don't know if you know that, Guy.
No, that's a fantastic question, because it's a very common question that's being asked by customers. So just a quick overview. So the M on the left side represents the instance family type, right? So M is the general purpose one, R is for memory intensive, and C for compute optimized, and so on and so forth. So M is a general purpose one. 6 means that's the 6th generation, if you will, right? The older generation is the M5, and M5 is Intel based, M5A is AMD based, and M6 is our own Graviton 2, essentially. Right, so that means that whenever you see an M, you will see an M6G, because that stands for the Graviton instances.
Right. Cool. Hopefully that answers the question. Thanks for that kind of little segue. Bill, I don't know if you have any specific questions you want to throw out there to Guy. I keep talking.
Well, I'll just add on to what Guy talked about here. We also have the T4Gs, which are another general purpose Graviton instance, very capable to handle your burst intensive workloads. And matter of fact, a lot of customers that I deal with who haven't used the Graviton chipset yet, we look at some of their general purpose workloads that are already running on like T2 and T3 as good starting points to move into Graviton. It's just by nature, right? Those T machines are kind of like your worker horses of the whole fleet that can do a lot of different general purpose needs. And so because of that, not usually as niche or specialized, and a good starting point. Guy, I don't know kind of what you've found with that, but that's probably a good segue. The question I'd love to ask you is, in the customers you engage with, who haven't tried out this technology yet, where do you typically try to start to ease that transition path?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good question, Michael. So, there are two options here, right? Other customers who would like to build net new workloads on AWS, and then they can start leveraging, whether, as you mentioned, in dev and test environments, for example, they want to experiment and they want to leverage the power of Graviton 2 and the cost benefit and performance, then definitely they can go with the T4G. as an example, because it's a great starting point. On the other hand, what I've seen, and from my personal perspective, a lot of customers who are already running on M5 or R5 and so on and so forth, and they are looking for ways of doing some cost optimization, getting this out of the box cost reduction and performance. This is when they would like to run some POC, for example, setting up a cluster on the side with let's say an M6G or an R6G and testing it out.
Cool. Awesome. So we've got a question here from, I know it's Alex. Stephen Biddle, what are the most common questions you get when customers are looking into Graviton? And maybe we can also pass this, but I think this would be a good segue into the customer stories we've got chatting about. And just for those who have maybe just joined us kind of in between, today we're chatting about Graviton, which is a different kind of underlying, so correct me if I'm wrong, a different kind of underlying hardware for your services at AWS. And the big reason we haven't mentioned this yet is it's often cheaper than using some of the Intel services. So we'll kind of cover that in the stories that we have in a minute. So stick around to kind of hear more about that. But the questions I normally get is kind of what is Graviton? And I try and do my explanation, or I'll pull someone like Guy into my meetings to try and explain it a bit better than me. But yeah, the common question kind of what is it? And maybe how do I take advantage of this? But what about you, Biddle? What are the common questions you get?
Yeah, wonderful starting point here. And so most commonly what I get asked about is like, hey, we're told that, just turn these on or just use these instances and instant cost savings. But like, what are the considerations I should have in my development pipeline to integrate such a technology? And so like, you want to look back and see, are you using cloud formation templates, infrastructure as code to run your environment? If so, your first check should be, are you referencing x86 architecture within those templates? Like you'll need to change some of the templates out before you kind of move to a Graviton ARM-based workload. Another question that's really worth looking at with customers, and as you kind of look through your own environment, is like, what is the cost opportunity, right? Maybe your environment is like mainly GPUs, D machines, I machines, things that aren't really there for Graviton yet. Because you just want to be clear right now with what we run with Graviton, you have your C6G, R6G, T4G, and M6G. Those will continue to evolve. But if most of your environment doesn't have the capability to really run on those, and maybe you're specialized to different instance types that need additional network capability, for example, that Graviton doesn't maybe offer yet, then that could limit your cost opportunity, right? So that's the first two things I do with any customer is one, how are we deploying our infrastructure? Is it using infrastructure as code? And then secondly, let's do a cost assessment to see what your opportunity can be, because with any change in your environment, time is money. And so let's just make sure the opportunity is there for the cost. We know it is pretty much most of the time. And that cost difference can be anywhere from 20% to 40% additional cost savings, depending on what generation of EC2 you're running today.
I mean, that number in itself, 20 to 40% cost saving, is why we recommend it a lot of the time and recommend you guys kind of go check it out. I'll be throwing in some links to just general Amazon information. I'll do that now. And also a really useful blog I found about kind of migrating to Graviton that I'll recommend reading. But that's a great kind of segue. So let's go into a real life customer story. And so Guy, there was a customer story you had in mind. Do you want to tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Steph. So what we did, basically, we were working closely with one of the largest telcos in EMEA, and they had a significant data analytics workload running on AWS. So they migrated, a bunch of terabytes to AWS. They did all kind of, machine learning and with SageMaker and used Redshift for data warehousing, and they were also using Amazon EMR. And we did a couple of iterations of cost optimization, and we tried to understand where can we help reduce cost, because obviously that Amazon EMR cluster was quite significant in terms of size, right? Because you need to process a large amount of data within their data lake. So we did all the right things in terms of best practices around the Amazon EMR, like scaling.
Just to cut in, Guy.
Yeah.
Do you want to explain what EMR stands for? Just so
absolutely. Yeah, so Amazon EMR stands for Amazon Elastic MapReduce. So this is the AWS offering essentially for everything that relates to the Hadoop ecosystem. So for example, if customers are very much familiar with the on-prem platforms like Hadoop, Cloudera, Hortonworks, and so on and so forth, they can essentially leverage Amazon EMR on AWS to run their Spark, Hive, and so on workloads, and then leverage the elasticity of EMR, use spot instances, so they can leverage our spare capacity from the data centers to leverage that. Oh, so there is a question.
Yeah, I was going to say, just mention Spot. So is Graviton on Spot?
That's a perfect timing. That's great because yes, absolutely yes, and that's exactly what we did with the customer. So and I will explain about it in a second how that correlates nicely. So we said, okay, let's take this quite significant EMR cluster, which was mostly based on R5 and big instances like 16 extra large or 12 extra large. So obviously lots of CPU and memory. So we said, let's try to run the same workload on another EMR, Amazon EMR cluster based on Graviton 2 instances. And we're just going to compare how much time does it actually takes for our jobs to run on the non-Graviton 2 cluster to the Graviton 2 cluster. And the customer loved it, right? Because there is no engineering effort that is required here, right? There is no, dependencies issues or, something that might work on x86 on the Intel R5 and won't work on the R6G. So we just went to the console, created a new cluster based on R6G. In Amazon EMR, you have also an option to create task nodes so it can scale when needed, and this was based on spot instances. So we leveraged spot instances also based on Graviton 2. We launched the cluster. We took a subset of those running jobs. We placed it on that cluster, and in the end of the week, we gathered around to see what was the runtime, right? If we compare the runtime of the Graviton 2 to the non-Graviton 2 cluster, and we were very, very much impressed because, seeing the announcement is one thing, obviously, but testing in the field is a different thing. But the nice part is that what we've seen is the jobs running on the Graviton 2 were actually running 24% faster than on the non-Graviton cluster. And this is in addition to the 20% you're getting out of the box in terms of cost reduction, where you've just taken an R6G 2 extra large and compare it to an R5 2 extra large. So think about it. I mean, it's not only the out-of-the-box cost optimization, but obviously clusters are now running 24% faster. Hence, you're getting an additional benefit of running it for a shorter time. So that's absolutely awesome.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I think that's a double whammy with Graviton, exactly like you said. It's that cost optimization by just clicking a button, and there's also that it's just faster. It's just better in simple English. But yeah, that's a great, and the customers have been really impressed with that. Biddle, I assume that you've obviously had some conversation with customers about Graviton. How have those gone?
Yeah, I'll give you guys a really great example. Snapchat, maybe you have it on your phone, maybe you don't. Go check them out, right? But popular messaging service. And so what we did with Snap is we looked at workloads that were doing video encoding to start with, specifically, and Steph, you'll put a link here in the chat in a moment to where you can read the testimonial where you can actually watch the video where they speak about it. But the too long didn't read is we worked with the engineering team, identified workloads that were doing video encoding that could move to C6Gs. And what we found from doing these tests was approximately a 10% drop in CPU utilization. The machine's just running more effectively. Basically, the Graviton machine took 10% less CPU to do the same job as the C5. And so you have instantly that additional efficiency with power from that specific workload example. And then not only that, we found consolidation efforts where we could reduce the number of instances running in the environment to power the same workload. So it magnified the cost savings. So on paper, we had roughly about 20% cost savings just from going C5 to C6G. And then when you amplify that with the fact that we're running less instances to do the same workload, to the tune of like 10% less CPU, that's effectively another 10% of cost savings for less resources to do the same job. So you're looking at almost close to a 30% total blended savings benefit for just this use case. Just one other real quick example we see with some of our other customers in our segments, like Intuit, another perfectly good case study that's publicly referenceable that you guys can check out. We're using Graviton to help process some of their time-intensive tax workloads around the busy parts of the season. And again, we're seeing very similar uptick in performance, jobs taking anywhere between 5 to 10% or more less time to do the same thing on new machines, which is huge, right? That's time you give back to your engineering. And that's what we're trying to do here, along with the environmental benefits of the ARM architecture, which we probably won't spend too much time on, but just to call out, they use less energy overall, which creates a better environmental footprint, which is one of AWS's goals to be carbon neutral here in the next few years.
Great. I mean, all amazing points. And the small, I mean, I've been working with customers and I've started to bring this up now. I've learned more and more, especially with Guy. And one of the ones that we've done with a telco customer is they've now kind of seen the data, the supporting evidence from engagements like this. And then now they're doing a whole project to migrate onto that. And EC2, sometimes a bit more interesting with how you do the migration, because it depends on what kind of services you're using on it. And next week we're going to have a part 2 on Graviton, where we're going to go into more detail about actually using Graviton with EC2 and RDS and some of the information about that, so we can share some more stories here. So we're going to do a little demo of just how you can use Graviton on Elastic MapReduce. Guys, going to take over in a sec. But before we do that, there was a question answered a little bit while I just held on to. So are there any gotchas with running Bottle Rocket OS on Graviton 2 in EKS clusters? Do either of you guys know anything about that?
That's a really good question. We'll probably have to take it back.
Okay.
But what I will say, I mean, at least from my personal experience, that the Graviton 2 team is, I mean, at least for me, for working with my customer, is like super helpful. And, sometimes I mentioned EMR, for example, and Michael mentioned his own use case. Sometimes customers do need to treat different dependencies, or they have their own workloads. They do require some dependencies of x86. The Graviton service team is more than happy to see how they can help, right, with the migration processes. This is also something to keep in mind.
That's a great point. And I'm just going to throw up our email information. And so for that person, please feel free to email the show at customization@amazon.com, and we can always pass you along to those people. And generally, if anybody has any suggestions for show episodes, we're always looking for things that you guys are interested in. So feel free to send us an email about that. Right. Let's hang on. Let's do one more question while it's up before we do our little demo. So what are the technical requirements to switch to Graviton instances? For example, I'm running purchase software on top of a Linux on an M5. Will that run on an M6G, or would I need to have a version of that software specifically compiled to run on an M6G? In a short kind of answer, Guy, what would you say?
Yeah. That's a fantastic question. So when we look on the ecosystem, our partners and the ISVs, and also our own AWS services, so we see how things are being developed constantly in terms of developing images essentially for Graviton 2 for ARM support. So I can share with you a link about what is there in the ecosystem. But it's essentially, if you have a specific software, then we can obviously work with the self-understand if that is something which is currently supported with ARM and being compiled. And if not, obviously, what is the migration process? Are there any dependencies? Because there might be cases where there are no dependencies and you can try to run it on Graviton 2 and you can see if that will work. I mean, if not, then we need to look on case by case, right? What I also say, it depends, of course, on the operating system version. I think like, Vince left off with another telco. It really depends, because we do support, Amazon Linux, CentOS 8 and above, and there are other operating systems, but then, we have to go into the details to make sure that this version is supported.
Yeah, that's a great point, and something we'll be covering next week about the newer the version is, the more likely it's going to be covered by Graviton. So how to figure out that kind of thing. So let's do a quick demo of how easy it is to find Graviton in your console. So let's try this. So first I'm showing a screen. So Guy, do you want to take over and share your screen?
Yeah, sure.
The nerves of technical chaos that can happen with this kind of thing.
Yeah. Let's give it a try then. And let me know when you can see my screen.
All right, here we go. Yes, we can see.
There we go. Okay, that's great. Yeah, so just wanted to give you like a quick example, focusing in that case on Amazon Elastic MapReduce, as I mentioned. So you can essentially search for EMR on the toolbar in your AWS console, and then you are here you go. I mean, you're in Amazon EMR console. Now, for example, if I would like to create a cluster in Amazon EMR, so that's like the first page I will see, where I can specify, the cluster name, the release of EMR, so different releases with new capabilities and new features and so on. But the nice part here is when I go to the hardware configuration, I select the instance type, you can see then today, I, for example, can select not only the traditional M5s, but I can also select M6G, right? So the nice part then, what we've done in the POC, we just said, okay, let's launch a new cluster. Let's select those M6G instances, right? I want to see what is the performance gains I'm getting here. And that was about it, right? We selected the instances. Obviously, we did a couple of configuration about using spot instances, leveraging those type of instance types, and we created a cluster. So that is a really important concept to understand, because in EMR, and also next week you will cover it with RDS, this is the advantage when you want to switch to Graviton 2 using a managed service. It's basically just selecting the relevant instance type from the drop-down selection.
Yeah, super quick and easy, and you're just looking for that G option. And also, I think, please correct me if I'm wrong, guys, that as long as you choose the version that's correct, like available enough, so whatever engine or release in this case you're looking at, the Graviton option will be there for you. So you always want to, I mean, that's kind of, I assume general culture is where you want to try and use the newest version. I always do. I think when I'm trying to deploy things, you use the newest version of a software. Cool. All right. Thank you for showing that quick and easy way of doing that. So we've got a couple of minutes left. Do we want to cover, is there anything like you really want to suggest or recommend people go and do today that would be a really good like starting point? Biddle, what do you recommend people go and do if they first want to learn about Graviton?
Yeah, I'll go back to kind of the talking point earlier. Let's identify which general purpose machines are running in your environment. Most all customers have a batch of T machines in there. Let's start with that. And then ideally, let's work with a dev environment that's using Ts, start to build a proof of concept case study, if you will, that the performance can handle the workload. We're pretty confident in the product itself, but like any new use case, you want to test it out. But like just real quick too, wanted to go back to a question on the chat a few moments ago about Bottle Rocket. We got a blog post we'll put here in the chat in a moment, but we fully support Bottle Rocket operating system with Graviton. Docker support is enabled with that too. So yeah, knock yourself out. We'd love to see you do it on Bottle Rocket. And if you have issues, email us back. But yeah, I don't foresee it. I think just kind of to close out on my thought here too, with what customers should try out first with Graviton. We've seen a strong use case with processing media-rich content, video encoding, for example, like with Snap. So if you have YouTube embedded videos within your applications, for example, things that are hosting content of that sort, we've seen time and time again that that's pretty good use case to start with. So take that for what you will.
Great, and thanks for sharing that and answering the questions. So hopefully that we passed on. There's some quick Googling going on right there, I think, for Biddle, which I'm very impressed by. Guy, what would be your kind of getting started first action, what people could go away from today's session to go and do?
Yeah, absolutely. So I will tackle it from a different angle. I think Graviton 1 was kind of, people were saying, oh, Graviton 1 will probably use it for web servers, something small at scale. But the nice part about Graviton 2, you never know how that will be used by our customers. I mean, this is the nice part, right? So it can be used for databases, it can be used for, big data, it can be used for build and test. I mean, we've seen Cassandra database, MariaDB databases, GitHub, GitLab, so many different partners are adopting it in the wider ecosystem. So there are so many options here. and things that customers can do. And this is a key benefit, right? I mean, if you're running Graviton 2 in ARM, there's no restrictions here in terms of the flexibility of things we can do.
Great, awesome. Well, thank you both for joining today, and I'll chat about Graviton. As I said, next week we're going to be looking a bit more about specifically EC2 and RDS and using Graviton, about how to get started with those, what are the kind of key benefits, and more granular information about starting points and some examples with another guest to come on, which will be great. I also want to shout out the thanks. I've been getting a lot of nice messages from people about the show, and hopefully we're seeing people are enjoying it. So please let us know. I'll post the email up again. If you have got ideas about what you would like us to cover, or if you want to come on the show, let us know. I'd love to hear from you. So please feel free to drop us an email. All right, that will be it from us today. Have a lovely rest of your day, everyone, and see you next week.